While Fabian Cancellara joined a select group of three-time winners of Paris-Roubaix, we'll be taking a look at some of the deeper questions and analysing a few that have got question marks hanging over their heads. And as much as the crashes were a major part of this year's Paris-Roubaix, crashing on the open roads amongst traffic is even more dangerous, so we'll provide a few tips how you and I can stay a bit safer on the road. And the NRS, the National Road Series, that's about to kick off with the Tour of Perth, or the Tour de Perth as they're calling it. We'll take a look at the quality of racing in the NRS against the A-League, which is in its final series, and see how those two compare. And Dr. Mitch Anderson, he drops by for a few tips in the Target Healthy Living tips on how we can maybe incorporate a little bit of running into our training. And also, it's a change of venue for the classics. We're away from the pavé, we're onto the climbs of the Ardennes. Amstel Gold Race is about to get underway this weekend. Can Simon Gerrans take out the victory? I'm Matt Keenan, this is the Bike Lane. He's Wade Wallace, and he keeps telling us he's got an Olympic Games gold medal. He's Scott McGrory. Let's go. Paris-Roubaix started with Fabian Cancellara as the unbackable favourite, and he didn't disappoint. The race has already been analysed extensively, so we're going to keep it brief. We're going to keep it, or try to just one word. How would you sum up his win?
Confidence. Had an enormous amount of confidence going in. He actually went in there as the winner, I feel, going in, and everyone else was trying to beat him. Almost to the point where he was perhaps overconfident, holding onto the team car there at one stage. The commissaires were going nuts, telling him to get rid of it. Would have been a crack up if he got to the finish line and they DQ'd him for holding onto the car too long.
One word for me would be tactical. Normally we see Cancellara win just with brute force, brute strength. This time he actually had to come into the velodrome and play some, tactics to actually get over and win.
I thought it was patience. You spoke about confidence. A few years ago, I thought he was overconfident and he was trying to go too far from home. But he was patient, just as he was at the Tour of Flanders, and he waited for his right moment and he pounced. The one thing that hurt me from the weekend with Paris-Roubaix was that, Wade, you picked Nicky Terpstra, and I laughed at your expense as he was 13 minutes away in the Tour of Flanders, and you were the best. He was third.
He saved them, and Omega Pharma Quickstep were right up there with so many cards to play, and things didn't pan out their way, but Terpstra was the one who saved them.
The cars kept falling over. I saw that with all the crashes.
True, but not Terpstra.
But I claim, I feel robbed actually, because I think Sebastian Turgot, he was the man. He was in the position and had a flat tyre just at the wrong time. And I finished 10th in the end.
I wasn't robbed, I was way off the mark with John Degenkolb in 28th position. But a couple of key questions coming out of it. Thor Hushoff, I conclude that despite how brilliant he's been, and of the utmost respect for him, he is past his best. He's 35 years of age. I think he now should be reverting to helping others on the team.
He's been at the top of his career. He's been world champion. He's got a couple kids now. I honestly can't imagine being in a competitive mindset at that age with other priorities. And when you're at the top, there's only one way to go, and that's down. So that's where I think he's going.
Spoken like an expecting father.
I've got a soft spot for the old guys in the peloton, and I think that he can still contribute. Perhaps not to the level that we've seen him in the past, but I'm sure if he's got his head right and he's motivated, he can still make a big contribution to the next couple of seasons.
You're trying to be nice, you agree. He is past his best, but he has a big contribution to make. Pipo Pozzato, one of the playboys of the peloton. When he came to Melbourne for the World Championships, he said he was refraining from sex until he won the rainbow jersey. Well, he may as well join the monastery. He is never going to win a world title. I think he's done. I don't think he is a contender for big races again.
And he's not very popular within the peloton, we'll say. I know some of the riders out there that think he's too much of a playboy, too flamboyant, and he wants to get the victories without all the hard work. And I think that's what we saw this year in the classic season.
You think he's done?
He's got a big flamboyant tattoo on his back. I think he's going to have to get removed. Yeah.
And he's got the tattoo of the date in Roman numerals on his arm of when he won Milan-San Remo. He doesn't have to worry about another one of those Roman numerals, I don't believe. We also saw a lot of crashes. Has Geraint Thomas crashed more than anybody else in the peloton this year?
Tyler Farrar, maybe.
Oh, dramatic moments in Milan-San Remo. Geraint Thomas, one of the top favourites from the Sky Pro Cycling squad, has hit the deck, and he's going to find it very difficult to get back involved. Tyler Farrar, he crashes so often in this race.
They're going head-to-head for the award of the most crashes, but yeah, it's very unfortunate, and it's been at the wrong time. It was Milan-San Remo. As they're coming to the Cipressa, he crashed. Then we got to Tour of Flanders. They went over the old Quermont. On the way to the Paderberg, he crashed there.
Oh! Thomas, Geraint Thomas. Geraint Thomas.
And then we saw at Roubaix this time again, another crash, just getting himself in the wrong position every time.
Is that Thomas again? Geraint Thomas getting caught up in another crash.
Does that tell us something about where he's at psychologically? Because those 3 races that you've mentioned were his big target. Is he fragile?
It's the big pressure races on himself, isn't it? And who knows, maybe he's overextending himself at that point of the race, because there are always crucial times at the race. So
I think experience. I think it's just experience. He'll learn a lot from this year, and I think once he gets a bit more confidence in the classics, then he'll be able to grow and put himself in the right position and avoid those crashes.
He's one of my favourite to watch race. But speaking of crashes, the 2 crashes from Quick Step on the cobbles, almost crashed one of them, Stuybar and Vandenberg. A lot of people are blaming the spectators.
No, their own fault. Absolutely. Look, Stein Vandenberg, he was just getting dropped, going off the back, went round a corner, and he was desperate to try and stay on the wheel, and went too far off the cobbles into the dirt, trying to get that easy run to get back on, and just clipped a spectator who hadn't moved at all. So he didn't step forward and he get collected. So I think that was Stein's fault, unfortunate as it was. And the incident with Stuybar, who kept it upright, that was incredible bike handling ability. But I actually believe that it was his bike handling ability that obviously saved him from crashing, but caused the incident in the first place. He was further off the road, off the cobbles than the other 2 riders. And I think he's just overconfident with his bike handling ability and clipped a spectator.
He looks like a good ride blindfolded, Stuybar.
oh, he's a good bike handler. 2 times cyclocross world champion. And yeah, it was amazing to see him pull up from that completely unharmed, but dropped.
Paris-Roubaix is another big topic for technology, and we've seen plenty of changes over the years, and going back to the 60s and the 70s, it was double handlebar tape to make the pavé bearable. We saw Duclos Lazelle win with rock shocks. They're now gone because of Ernesto Colnago said, "Not on my bike are you putting rock shocks." But this year, Wade, I saw deep dish carbon wheels, which a few years ago was unthinkable. How's it happening?
Yeah, most of them are riding the deep dish carbon wheels, the same things you'd see in any race. And it used to be the Ambrosio box section rims, 36 spoke. You couldn't break those things with a sledgehammer. But now, I mean, I talked to someone from Team Sky last year, and they didn't get 1 puncture. And most of them, not most of them, but a dozen of the teams broke their sponsorship obligations for only the Spring Classics, and they'll use FMB tubulars, which you feel beautiful, they grip to the cobbles much better, they take the edge off, and yeah, it's been like that for years.
Well, it's the big tyres now, isn't it? That's the one thing that they all do now, is put on a minimum of 25mm tyres, but most of them on 27s or 28mm tyres.
And everybody's still got 2 pieces of handlebar tape on, as you probably would.
It's the old school technology that seems to always come through.
It doesn't tire, does it? So, Fabian Cancellara, in one word, we've thrown ours out there. Keen to hear from you what you thought of his win, as well as Thor Hushovd. Is he done with, or is he not? Pipo Bizzato the same, and Geraint Thomas, can he come back at some point and win one of these big classics? We saw plenty of crashes on the weekend at Paris-Roubaix, and as nasty as they were, they're nowhere near as dangerous as crashing out on the road when you're mixing with motor vehicles, cars, buses and trucks. So Wade, a few tips on avoiding potential danger.
Yeah, when you're out in the open road, the pros, and you're everywhere from Fabian Cancellara down to me, we all have to worry about that, and it's an issue for everybody. And I'm fortunately quite lucky with traffic. I don't get myself into too many situations, but I honestly believe that that's because I make decisions before I go out to not put myself in these compromising situations. Things like choosing the route you take to and from your rides, making sure that they're not on really busy roads and you take the quietest ones. The time you go out as well. I would never ever go out on a Friday at 2:30, 3:30 p.m. You know, everyone's done their day, people have been getting a couple drinks. You know, and who you ride with as well is a big thing. A lot of times, you know, you go with guys that just get you into situations and you end up following, right? The next thing you know, before you know it, it's dangerous. So
that often happens with lights as well.
Yeah, exactly.
You can get sucked into going through a red light because of the people that you're with.
You're following.
You've been riding bikes for 35 years. Give us your number 1 tip.
Well, these days with all the MP3 players, I think unplug. Get rid of the music. Don't worry about that. Focus on riding your bike, especially in a bunch. More importantly, in a bunch is when you're in a group, you really have to think about everybody else and think of the other riders in the group, and I think unplug while you're in a bunch.
You hear things way before you actually see them, and your ears are much more useful than your eyes.
And you hear it and you can almost feel it.
Yeah.
The one thing that I like to do, and you've covered this on your website in the past, is actually the interaction with the motorists. If a motorist has done the right thing by me, I either give them the little wave, or that smile and nod of the head with is the thank you equivalent to a golf clap.
Yeah.
So what about you? What's your tip on staying safer on the road? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. As we're glued to the television in the middle of the night watching the Spring Classics, the National Road Series kicks off this weekend with the Tour de Perth, but will anybody be watching? Meanwhile, at the same time, we've got the finals for the A-League, and Del Piero over at Sydney FC, he's been attracting an average audience of almost 100,000 viewers on Fox Sports, pay-per-view. And the A-League, well, they've managed to strike a 4-year deal, attracting $160 million for the broadcasting of their games. Meanwhile, Cycling Australia, they're paying for the production of coverage of the National Road Series. Yet I contend that the quality of play in the A-League and the National Road Series, it's not that much of a gap.
I am closer to being an NFL quarterback than the NRS is close to being at the World Tour level. That's not to say that there's not some good racers at the pointy end. There's some very good ones, and some go on to having excellent careers. But I think it just has a lot to say about the depth of the NRS, and it's just really not a lot of good riders after the top few.
A lot of young riders in our National Road Series. Some of the older guys there as well, but it's really a very young base. So young riders racing against young riders, they're not really getting a lot of experience. Look, I like our National Road Series and I want it to be as good as it can be, but I think the experience of the players in the A-League that get to play with or against a player like Del Piero, and every couple of years they bring out some superstars from Europe, I think they gain more out of playing with and against those kind of players than you do in the NRS.
Okay, the Australian soccer team, Australian football team if you prefer, is ranked number 39 in the world. Our men's cycling side of the business, we're ranked number 5 in the world, and we have been in the top 5 for the last 3 years. You look at a guy like Nathan Huss, who goes directly from the National Road Series across the World Tour level. Will Walker comes back the other way and he's not able to dominate. And I contend that Cadel Evans, as brilliant as he is, if he came back and rode the National Road Series and was as overweight as Del Piero and spent as much time training as Alessandro, he would not be able to dominate. He'd be the best rider, but he wouldn't dominate.
Cadel would be riding 2 stages a day around primary schools in our National Road Series races. They're really not very good races for those top level guys and for development, I don't think.
We need to get those races to a level where somebody, obviously not a Cadel Evans, but maybe a guy like Matt Wilson, would come back and actually ride the National Road Series in the same way Brett Emerton has gone from the Premier League back to racing, back to playing in the A-League. That's the level we need to get to. But I think you two are underselling the National Road Series.
We're just not getting any of those riders coming back. We're not seeing it. We're not seeing riders at the end of their career deciding to come back and do some NRS races.
That's
which
financial.
is unfortunate.
That's financial. That's not the quality of the
The
race.
US has it. The US has, like Hank Vogels went and finished his career in the US, and but they do pay a salary too, and there is a market for that, and they have the population.
Well, that's what I've always set the NRS on. I've always wanted the NRS here in Australia to be what the American system used to be. If you weren't quite good enough to go to Europe, or you had another option if you weren't quite able to stay in Europe, a lot of the riders would go to America. If we can get them back here and have our National Road Series at the level that the American racing used to be, that'd be fantastic.
All right, you've both had your say. You're on the A-League, I'm on the National Road Series. What about you? Is the National Road Series as good as the A-League in their comparative competitions around the world? Tell us what you think. As good as cycling is for us, some studies are now indicating that maybe incorporating a little bit of running or some weight-bearing activity would be better for our long-term bone density. In this week's Target Healthy Living Tips, Scott McGrory catches up with a man who's competed in the Y and Ironman, even finished in 11th position. He's a physiotherapist and he's a doctor as well. He's with Mitch Anderson.
So what we're really talking about here is the fact that if you ride a bike for a very long time, over, say, for myself, since 30, 35 years or so, and I'm not actually carrying my own weight, and the bike is supporting me the whole time, so my bones are losing some density. What should I now be doing then to just regain some strength in my bones?
Yeah, look, I mean, the best thing you can be doing is weight-bearing exercise. So it's actually the muscle stressing the bone, so tugging on it and stressing it, in the same way that if you get a fracture, it heals at the site because there's a little bit of movement, but like a little bit of play. So the molecules or the cells actually respond really well to getting some movement. And so it's exactly the same with trying to increase your bone density, is that you want to stress the system. In fact, it's like it's all strength, you know, stressing the system means that you will strengthen the system.
Okay, well look, I've tried to run in the last few years. I'm quite time poor. I go to the Tour de France every year. You can't take a bike with you. We don't have enough time. It's much easier to go for a half an hour run, perhaps. But I seem to struggle to get past 2 weeks of running, and my back gets sore and I start to break down and I get back on the bike.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is a big problem. Injury and new runners, it's a particular problem. I'd suggest walk running as a really good system to approach a new sport. So it sounds a bit poxy, walk running, and I know that...
That's what I do anyway, so just being honest.
So I approach it a bit like, I tell people, it's a bit like swimming. So on a 2-minute cycle, you can do a 30-second jog and try and make it biomechanically perfect, and then have a 90-second walk. And try and repeat that, 10 times. So then you're getting about 20 minutes of weight-bearing exercise that's not running, because it's that last 10 minutes where you're probably doing all the damage. Yep. So it's gradually stressing your system a little bit more and more so that your muscles get used to firing at the right times and you become a better runner without the fatigue at the end of it.
Well, look, final word from you. Just how much of a risk am I in just crumbling to the ground as a broken mess now?
Well, given your gender, well, I'm not too worried about you, though I will be writing you a script later on. Don't worry about it.
Thanks very much, Mitch.
So based on the tips from Dr. Mitch Anderson, who's coming for a walk-run tomorrow? This weekend sees the peloton bid farewell to the pavé as they head into the Ardennes, and it's the Amstel Gold Race, the youngest of the Spring Classics, first race back in 1966, but it follows a familiar pattern with big races on the calendar. It was created to promote something, not a newspaper, this time to promote beer. One Australian has won it. It was a rain-soaked day in April of 1983, and it was Phil Anderson. But this is a course that can be described as a 250-kilometre criterium with plenty of hills on it. And
lots of hills, that's for sure. When you have a look at the course map, one of the most important pieces of equipment I think needed for this is some kind of satellite navigation device, because you can just see very small pocket of the Netherlands where they put the Amstel race, and it's unbelievably complicated. 32 categorised climbs in it. We don't see many make the transition from the pavé to winning the Ardennes. The last guy to have won Roubaix and the Amstel Gold Race within his career was Johan Museeuw, and he won back in 1994. So we see a big shift.
Yeah, and the way teams specialise their riders these days is very evident with the Cobble Classics versus the Ardennes Classics. They completely turn the roster around, and you see a lot of the guys racing the Tour de Basque Country. Simon Gerrans, Philippe Gilbert, Gasparotto, who won last year. They'll switch in that squad and put them into the Ardennes, and the Cobble Classics riders will go and have a rest.
Well, one of the riders we'll be looking at very closely is Simon Gerrans, who was introduced to cycling via Phil Anderson. Who are the contenders? Who's going to win this race?
Well, for me, Simon Gerrans, absolutely. He's finished third in Amstel before. He's been Australia's best contender in Amstel Gold Race over the last couple of years, and I think he's on very good form coming off a victory in the Tour of the Basque Country. The other one for me would be Alejandro Valverde. Perhaps we'll see something like we saw last year at Tour Down Under, the top of Wollonga Hill, those two going battle for the finish. Hopefully this time, though, it's Gero that gets the win.
They've got a great rivalry now, don't they, Gerrans and Valverde? Hopefully Gerrans, if it comes back together again, comes out on top on Sunday.
I'm going to be cheering for Simon Gerrans, but since Scott's already picked him, I'm going to go for Sagan or Hegedon.
Biased.
Yes, slightly biased, but the course is slightly different than it has been in previous years. They have the same finish as the World Championships was last year, so it's just a little bit past the top of the Cauberg, and I think Sagan will be able to follow absolutely anybody out there, and then in a sprint, it's going to be hard to beat.
Well, Philippe Gilbert will be trying to resurrect things for him so far this season. He's won it twice before, and he won virtually at the same position the World Championships last year. But I think the Dutch have got a guy to cheer about with Tom Jelte-Slagter, the guy that won the Tour Down Under this year, and he showed his class up against Gerrans at Wollonga Hill, so I think he'll be a factor. Gasparotto's the defending champion with Astana, but I think Maxim Igolinski will be their man. He won Liège last year. He was really active in Milan-San Remo. I think he's going to be tough to beat. But I like your call on Peter Sagan. He skipped Paris-Roubaix and he goes across to Amstel.
He's got to be getting tired though. It's been a long season for him, but he's surprised us every race though. So.
And he's only 23. Yeah. So we've put it on the table. We've hedged our bets with choosing a few. Who's your tip to win Amstel Gold Race? I think there'll be plenty of bias for Simon Gerrans. That's it for this week's edition of The Bike Lane, and as much as we really want to hear your thoughts on the topics we've discussed today, We want to hear about the topics you're discussing out on the bunch rides, the argument you can't settle at the cafe. We'll have a giveaway for the question that comes in or the topic prompter that comes in that we choose to debate. Looking forward to hearing what you're discussing out on the road. On behalf of Wade, Scott, myself, Matt Keenan, can't wait to read what you've got to say.